My family banned me from my own sister's wedding. They said I was an embarrassment and didn't deserve a seat at the table. Imagine that your own blood deciding you're better off erased. So I walked away. I booked a trip, disappeared into the mountains, and for the first time I felt free. But while I was gone, their perfect little fairy tale wedding collapsed. Lies spilled, betrayals exploded, and suddenly the same people who cut me out were blowing up my phone, begging me to come back. My mother pleaded. My father demanded. My sister cried. They wanted me to fix the disaster they built. But I didn't pick up. Because by then, it was already too late, sweetheart. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reach. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story moves you, please subscribe to my channel. Every subscription tells me my voice matters, and that no one should ever be erased the way I was. My name is James, and this is the story of how my family tried to bury me until the truth buried them. The wood-paneled walls of our family lodge in Park City had always felt warm to me, a place where we gathered for birthdays, Christmases, the rare moments of unity. But that afternoon the room was heavy, charged with something sharp and invisible. My parents sat stiffly on the leather sofa, Lyric perched on the edge of her chair with her fiancé Drake's arm draped over her like a leash, and Genevieve Thornhill, Drake's mother, loomed at the head of the table as though she owned the house. I tried to ignore the way Genevieve's voice carried more weight than anyone else's, how she dictated the seating arrangements and the menu, as if she were orchestrating a gala rather than my sister's wedding. I had been clinging to one hope, that no matter how many details they handed over to her, I would still stand beside my sister as best man. It was the one role I thought no one could take from me. James' Lyric's tone was light, but rehearsed, her smile brittle. I need to make a small change. Talia's going to be my best person instead of you. She's just more in tune with the energy I want for the wedding. The words landed like ice water on my chest. I blinked, waiting for her to laugh it off as a joke. But Drake smirked, squeezing her hand, and Genevieve looked smug, satisfied. My parents didn't object. My mother shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, "Sweetheart, you know how sensitive your sister is. She needs positivity right now." My father cleared his throat, adding, "Let's not make this into a big thing." I swallowed hard, but my voice broke through anyway. "A big thing, Lyric. I've stood by you through everything. Why are you cutting me out?" She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Because you don't support me, James. You always want to control things. I need space from that. Talia understands me. You just make me feel judged." Drake chuckled under his breath, as if my reaction proved her point. I bit down on the inside of my cheek, willing myself not to explode. The urge to shout, to list every sacrifice I'd made for her, pressed against my ribs. But I stayed silent, knowing that if I lashed out I would only confirm their picture of me as the problem. That evening, as the sky turned pink over the Wasatch Mountains, my phone buzzed with a message from Lyric. I opened it, my pulse hammering. "James, I don't want you at the wedding. You bring negative energy. Please don't contact me again until after it's over." I read it twice, then 3 times before lowering the phone. My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out. I stepped onto the balcony and stared at the mountains I'd grown up looking at, realizing with a cold certainty that my place in this family, at least in this so-called celebration, was gone. The line had been drawn, and I was on the outside of it. That night I couldn't sleep. My sister's words echoed in my mind, not just the rejection, but the way she'd said it, as though cutting me out was no different than changing flowers in a centerpiece. My chest burned with anger, but underneath it was exhaustion, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from years of playing a role you never chose. Lying in the dark, memories flooded back like unwelcome guests. When I was 10, Lyric broke the family computer by spilling soda on it. I spent 2 weeks after school tinkering with its circuits, figuring out how to make it run again. My parents bought her a new phone as a reward for trying to be creative, while my repairs went unnoticed. In high school, I studied night after night, earning a full ride to Caltech. My parents congratulated me briefly at dinner before launching into plans for Lyric's pageant. When she failed her first semester of college, they threw her a pick-yourself-up party to show their unconditional support. And as adults, the cycle only deepened. When Lyric maxed out her credit cards, I quietly paid them down. When she was accused of stealing ideas for her fashion blog, I coached her through a public apology video. None of it was acknowledged. My interventions were treated as obligations, as though being the family's fixer was etched into my DNA. I felt my fists clench as I lay there. My 20s had been stolen by this endless treadmill of covering for her mistakes. And now when I voiced concern about Drake, about the way he spoke over her, controlled who she texted, and treated her like an accessory, they dismissed me as jealous, bitter, negative. The next morning, I caught something I wasn't meant to hear. I'd gone downstairs for coffee, lingering by the hallway, when Genevieve's clipped voice drifted from the study. "This wedding is Thornhill business," she said firmly. "Not a stage for the brother to play hero. He needs to stay out of sight." My heart froze. So it wasn't just Lyric's decision, it was orchestrated. Genevieve didn't want me near the spotlight. Later that day, I sat alone, scrolling through my laptop, a gnawing suspicion pushing me to dig. Drake's company, the one he bragged about constantly, wasn't as glossy as it appeared. Court filings, investor complaints, even whispers of fraud, they were all there, hidden in plain sight if you knew where to look. I gathered the documents, my pulse racing. If I was right, Drake wasn't just arrogant, he was dangerous. He was building a house of cards with my sister inside it. I tried to warn my parents. My mother's face tightened. My father waved me off. "Stop inventing drama, James. This wedding is important for all of us. Don't sabotage it." The words cut deeper than they realized. For them, image mattered more than truth. More than me. That night, staring at the screen, I finally accepted what I had resisted for years. My family would rather risk everything than listen to me. My last thread of trust in them frayed to nothing. And as the lodge grew quiet, the Wasatch Mountains looming black against the starlit sky, I understood something I had never admitted before. This wasn't just about being excluded from a wedding. This was about a lifetime of being excluded from my own family's love. By the end of the week, I'd been erased without anyone saying the word. The tux fitting happened without me. The photo walkthrough poses lighting shot list was shared in a family group thread I was quietly removed from. The bachelor party became a golf club dinner hosted by Genevieve. My name wasn't on the guest list. Each time I asked for details, Lyric answered with a single syllable or nothing at all. My parents fell back on the same line. Let's not make things tense, as if tension were a thing I was inventing and not something they were actively feeding. It started to feel like I'd slipped behind glass. I could see the movement, hear the laughter from the kitchen when vendors dropped by, but no one looked in my direction long enough to acknowledge I was still there. When I walked into a room, conversations truncated themselves. When I left, they picked up again in a rapid hum. I stopped pretending not to notice. At night, lying awake in the room, I grew up in pride, did a slow, painful tug-of-war with habit. One rope burned my palms with the urge to insist, to stand my ground, to force the people I loved to treat me like I mattered. The other rope asked the quieter question I've avoided for years. What if loving them didn't mean letting them use me? I pictured the aisle without me there. Lyric's smile steady and bright because it didn't have to bounce off my face for permission. I pictured myself at the back of the venue anyway, a shadow just in case she needed me. The image made me sick. Ryland showed up on my porch with coffees, no warning, like he always did when I wouldn't answer texts. We didn't go inside. We sat on the steps, jackets zipped against the alpine chill. He listened without interrupting, hands wrapped around the cardboard cup for warmth. When I finally ran out of words, he said, "You've been cast as the emergency exit for so long, you stopped checking whether the building was even on fire. You don't have to stay in a place that keeps telling you you're not needed." I didn't say anything for a long time. A jay hopped along the railing, bold and bright as paint. I watched it tilt its head and blink. "If I leave," I said, "I'll be the bad guy. You'll be the person who stopped setting himself on fire," he said. "They'll live." That night I pulled out a shoebox I'd tucked under the bed. Plane tickets I never took because Lyric needed me to pick her up from a failed audition. A folded party invitation I skipped to help her film an apology video. Receipts from her credit card I'd paid down in the quiet the way a groundskeeper trims hedges before dawn. On top of the pile lay a Polaroid from her 16th birthday, the party I threw in secret string lights zigzagging across our yard, her smiling with frosting on her nose. Beside it, a blank inside cover of a book my father had meant to give me for my birthday the following month, still in its brown bag when I found it in the trunk weeks later. He'd forgotten. Everyone had. I remembered baking myself a cupcake because the store had sold out of the one I liked, then tossing it untouched when no one came home early. I carried the shoebox to the trash and set it gently on top of the lid. I didn't throw it away. I just needed to feel the weight of nearly doing it. The decision came like a door clicking shut. I opened my banking app and transferred the money I'd set aside for their honeymoon gift to my travel account. Glacier, Montana. A lodge with timber beams and lake views that looked like a screensaver, a room available for a week starting the day after tomorrow. I booked the flights. I rented a car. I slid my phone face down across the kitchen table and felt my lungs stretch to full capacity for the first time in months. I printed a note for my parents and left it on the hall table. I'll be out of town for a week. Don't worry, I need a break. I didn't mention where. I didn't mention why. The truth was so simple, it felt radical. I wanted 7 days without being the anti-crisis team. No family, no favors, no carefully swallowed anger. 1 week with no phone. I would text Rylan when I landed and then power it off. If the world burned in my absence, maybe I'd finally learn it wasn't my job to hold up the sky. The morning I left the mountains wore a thin band of cloud like a scarf. The tires hummed on the highway, the town shrinking behind me into a watercolor of peaks and pines. In the rearview mirror, the Wasatch folded gently into distance, the house where we posed for holiday cards fading to a soft idea. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt the quiet come in like weather, steady and unarguable. Somewhere between the state line and the first stretch of 2-lane road, I realized I had no idea what they were doing in my absence, whether anyone would miss me in the practical way, the call to fix the printer, to draft a statement, to apologize on someone else's behalf. I let the thought pass through me, a wind that didn't linger. I didn't know that the moment my car curved out of the valley, the first domino had tipped. I didn't know what was about to unravel. All I knew was the clean line of asphalt, the open sky ahead, the feeling that for once my life fit inside my own hands. Glacier met me with air so clear it made my temples ache. The lodge sat against Lake McDonald, like it had grown there, logs darkened by weather and time decks strung with simple lanterns that clicked in the breeze. From my room, the water stretched out like polished stone mountains rising from its edges in quiet blue layers. I carried my bag inside and realized I was holding my breath. The silence wasn't absence here. It was presence. No music, no clatter of plans. Just wind in the pines, footsteps on wood, a distant door closing softly. I plugged my phone into the bedside charger out of habit, watched the screen light, then clicked it dark again. Not yet. The next morning I found the yoga deck as the sun climbed the ridgeline. Sage, the instructor, wore a soft gray sweater and spoke in a voice that seemed to understand how to leave a sentence open. We stretched, breathed, watched our breath make small clouds in the cool air. Letting go isn't abandonment, she said, as we rested at the end. Letting go is choosing your anchor. The words settled like warm tea. After class, I wandered down to the lake. 2 people waved from the dock, camera bags at their feet, Juniper and River, documentary filmmakers from Seattle on a scouting trip. We traded names, small histories, the shorthand strangers use when they want to be honest without being heavy. When I told them why I was there, Juniper tilted her head. You can't make a life out of being the safety net, she said. You'll forget what the trapeze felt like. In the afternoon, I bought a notebook at the lodge shop and took it to the porch. The first page fought me. My handwriting turned stiff the way a body resists a stretch it hasn't done in years. Then the sentences began to loosen. I wrote about the computer I fixed and the new phone that appeared in Lyric's palm as if magic had chosen her. I wrote about the scholarship letter folded once into my pocket on a night my parents barely looked up because they were soothing my sister's latest crisis. I wrote about being 26 and spending the night in a parking lot because she was too ashamed to go home after a disastrous video went viral. The pages filled with the things I had told myself didn't matter because they weren't catastrophes. They piled up anyway. Late afternoon, a small group of guests settled near the fireplace in the lounge, voices low and animated. I wasn't trying to listen, but I recognized the city name first, then the companies. Salt Lake, blockchain, lawsuits, missing funds. The hair on my arm stood up. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. It wasn't an uncommon story in that industry. Still, the rhythm of my pulse changed. I looked out at the lake and tried to line up my breathing with the lap of water against the rocks. Back in my room, I opened my laptop to clear a few work emails before I committed to the blackout I'd promised myself. An unread message hovered near the top, time-stamped around dawn, no subject line and address I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I clicked. There were attachments, PDFs, screenshots, a spreadsheet. The headings were familiar in all the wrong ways: investor contributions, escrow transfers, asset reallocation. My stomach tightened. I scrolled through the numbers and there it was, Drake's company name in a header, the dates lining up with the last 6 months of flash and spectacle. I didn't know who had sent it or why they had chosen me, but it didn't matter. The story I had suspected was no longer a suspicion. It sat on my screen, tidy and damning. I stood up too fast and the room tilted. I braced my hands on the window frame and looked out, grounding myself on the simple fact of a mountain existing whether or not a man lied at a table 3 states away. I could feel the old impulse call explain fix rising like heat in a closed car. I made myself stay still. The phone on the nightstand lit with a gentle buzz. I didn't touch it, but the preview flashed before the screen dimmed my mother's name. The first word of a voicemail flagged as urgent. "James, you need to." The rest cut off as the display faded. I stared at the black rectangle for a long count of 10. Then I walked over, held down the button until the screen went blank, and set it in the drawer of the bedside table. If there was an emergency, it would still be an emergency in the morning. If it was another demand wrapped as a crisis, I wouldn't be pulled into it before I could even stand up straight. Evening came like a ribbon of copper across the lake. I ate in the lodge dining room at a small table near the window salmon that tasted like it had been caught by hand from the thought of water-roasted vegetables sweet as October. The servers spoke in low tones, kind without intruding. For dessert, I ordered a slice of huckleberry pie and could hear my sister teasing me for being predictable. For the first time in days, the thought of her didn't feel like a bruise I'd pressed too hard. On the balcony, the air sharpened clean as a new page. Somewhere below, a kayak nudged the dock and was tied up for the night. I leaned against the railing and let my eyes adjust to the dark. A week, I told myself. 7 days of not performing a role I never auditioned for. 7 days of building a spine that didn't bend at the first sign of someone else's need. Behind me, the drawer held the sleeping phone and its half-spoken message. On the desk, the laptop waited with its open files, a map of choices I wasn't ready to make. In front of me, the lake held the sky and didn't spill a drop. I thought of Sage's words and chose an anchor, my breath, my body, the knowledge that I could be a man who didn't answer every call. I went to bed with the curtains open, the mountains dark and massive beyond the glass. Somewhere far away, plans were collapsing, reputations wobbling like stacks of crystal. I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew the steadiness of my own heartbeat, and the quiet, and the promise that for one night at least the only person I was responsible for saving was me. The night the rehearsal dinner unfolded at the Grand America, I wasn't there to see the chandeliers glitter over the rows of silver and crystal, or to watch my parents beam at the illusion of perfection. Later, I would hear it all in fragments, through whispers from cousins, through headlines that slipped into the business section, through the accidental confessions of people who still weren't sure if I was ally or enemy. But at the time, I was 3 states away, holding a mug of chamomile tea, convinced the world could not touch me. What I missed was this Drake and his closest friend Knox had turned the evening into something more like a bachelor's after-party than a rehearsal dinner. The champagne was endless, the whiskey flowing. By midnight, Knox was swaying, words falling out of his mouth without guardrails. He laughed too loud, leaned across the table and slurred that Drake's empire was already ashes, that the blockchain company everyone admired was weeks from collapse. The words traveled faster than any toast. Guests stopped mid-conversation, forks held in the air. One by one they turned to listen. Genevieve panicked. She hissed at servers to turn up the music, but the rumor was already spiraling, swelling like smoke in a room with no vents. Lyric heard it clearly. Her voice cut across the hum, sharp as broken glass. "Is it true?" Drake smiled the politician's smile he'd perfected, but when she pressed him again, the edges began to fray. He insisted Knox was drunk, that nothing was wrong. Lyric didn't let go. "Then why did you hide bank statements? Why did you refuse to let me see the accounts?" Something inside him cracked. His face hardened, his hand tightened on the stem of his glass, and the truth tumbled out not by choice, but by rage. He said the wedding, the grandeur, the endless flowers and imported linens were never about love. They were cover. They were theater designed to dazzle investors, to disguise a company already in freefall. The room went silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the electricity in the chandeliers. Genevieve's fury detonated next, but instead of turning on her son, she turned on Lyric. If you had behaved properly, she spat, he would never have been forced to lie. It was the kind of cruelty that lands like a slap. Guests gasped. Lyric broke into tears, humiliated in front of everyone she thought would be family. And while all of this spun out in real time, my own phone lay dark in a drawer beside my bed in Montana. 21 calls stacked against its blank screen, 30 messages piling up like pebbles against a closed door. Someone, maybe a guest who pitied me, maybe someone who wanted leverage, sent a video file that captured everything. It slid into my inbox waiting. But I had cut myself off, and so it stayed sealed, invisible to me. By the time the night ended, Lyric had walked to the center of the ballroom. Her makeup streaked her hands, trembling. She pulled the engagement ring from her finger. She held it out long enough for every camera in the room to see, and then set it on the linen tablecloth as if it were a piece of evidence. "It's over," she said. Genevieve collapsed into a chair, pale and shaking. Drake stormed out, leaving behind whispers, phones lifted for photos, and 100 guests wondering if they'd just watched a fortune implode. My parents, red-faced, frantic, humiliated, began looking for me as if I were the missing piece of machinery that could reverse disaster. They searched, they called, they begged the universe for me to appear. But I was hundreds of miles away, sipping tea, listening to logs shift in the fireplace, unaware that the ground beneath my family had just given way. The next morning in Glacier, I woke to the sound of wind funneling through pines. My body felt light, almost foreign, as if I'd left a weight somewhere behind me on the highway. I laced my boots and took the Avalanche Lake Trail, following switchbacks until the forest opened into a basin where water gleamed under cliffs streaked with snowmelt. Around me, hikers moved quietly, as if they too sensed this was a cathedral. Later, I joined a small workshop on painting landscapes. The instructor spread out brushes and palettes on a long wooden table. I had no talent, but that wasn't the point. For 2 hours, I dipped pigment into water, dragged it across paper, and let the mountains rearrange themselves in uneven strokes. My hands shook less than they usually did when I tried something new. For the first time in years, no one was watching to see whether I succeeded. Juniper and River found me afterward. We carried sandwiches to the edge of the lake where the water lapped against stones. They spoke about the moment they told their families they were leaving safe careers for documentaries. "Our parents thought we were throwing our lives away," River said. "But if we'd listened, we wouldn't be here now." I nodded because the words pierced something. All my life had been spent carrying expectations that weren't mine. For the first time, I admitted it, writing in my journal that night. I've lived 3 decades patching holes I didn't make. I've never lived for myself. When I returned to my cabin, the phone on the bedside table blinked red, the battery nearly drained. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the power button. My chest tightened. Did I really believe I could keep silence intact while the world spun on without me? I set it down again, still dark. The act felt like both courage and cowardice, and I couldn't tell which outweighed the other. At that same moment, hundreds of miles away, my mother was leaving a voicemail. "James, your sister's collapsed. Only you can..." The words would never reach me that night. I walked to the dining hall instead. On the porch, I crossed paths with Canyon, a guide who worked out of the lodge. He struck up conversation, asked where I was from, then lowered his voice. "You're out of Salt Lake, right? Heard about the blockchain mess blowing up there?" My stomach lurched. The story was spreading beyond private whispers now, out into the open air where strangers could name it. When I logged into my laptop to send a quick email for work, I noticed a new folder in my inbox. Its title was Plain Drake Documents. Inside were attachments, video files, financial records. My pulse raced, but the connection was weak, pages buffering endlessly. Frustration warred with dread. I shut the lid and told myself I'd look in the morning when the network was stronger. That night, I lay under heavy quilts while wind rattled the glass. The stillness of the room should have soothed me, but a thin thread of unease stitched itself through the quiet. Half of me was free, breathing deep for the first time in years. The other half heard a phantom ringing, a call echoing in the distance, unanswered. I closed my eyes, not knowing that back in Salt Lake my name was being whispered as the family's last salvation. Not knowing they were clutching at me as if I were the final rope keeping them from drowning. I slept on, caught between relief and foreboding, unaware that the silence I clung to had already turned into absence. The morning sunlight spilled through the wooden window frames of the lodge, painting the floor in pale gold. I was tying my boots, preparing for a short trip out to the hot springs when I finally opened my laptop. The connection was stronger than the night before, and the files in my inbox loaded without delay. I clicked on the video. The ballroom came to life on my screen. The music, the lights, the faces turned toward Drake as he cracked under pressure. His words were unshakable evidence the company was collapsing, the wedding nothing but a facade for investors. And then Genevieve's voice, sharp and merciless, tearing into Lyric instead of her son. My chest tightened. Lyric, who had spent years keeping me at a distance, was now standing alone under the weight of her own humiliation. I felt both fury and sorrow twist inside me. Another message followed from the same anonymous address: "You were right from the beginning. Now decide if you'll remain outside or take the key to end it all." Whoever it was, they were pulling me in deliberately, as though I were no longer allowed to stay a spectator. I powered on my phone. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, missed calls, dozens of texts. My mother's voice in words: "Lyric needs you." My father's: "Don't abandon the family now." And Lyric herself: "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, I need you." My throat tightened. For years I'd been invisible, dismissed, blamed. Now suddenly I was indispensable. The feeling was intoxicating, but beneath it was the sting of knowing I was needed only when the house was burning. Then came the call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice introduced herself as a reporter. She said she knew I had evidence that could dismantle Drake, that she wanted me to cooperate. My skin prickled. Was she the source of those anonymous files? Or was there someone inside Drake's empire feeding her? Almost immediately, another message from Lyric appeared. "I can't face this alone. But if you turn away, I'll know I've lost you forever." I stood frozen, phone trembling in my hand. Part of me wanted to hurl it into the lake to cling to the fragile peace I'd found here. The other part felt the chain of obligation tightening again. The old question returned sharper than ever: if I went back, would I be saving her? Or would I be stepping into the same cycle that had consumed me all my life? I walked down to Lake McDonald and stood at the shore. The water rippled in the morning breeze, clear enough to see the stones beneath. My reflection wavered, fractured. My hands shook as the phone buzzed again, screen lit like a beacon. Somewhere inside me a whisper rose. "This time will not be the same. This time you set the terms." When I returned to Salt Lake City, the penthouse no longer felt like home. The curtains were drawn, the air heavy. My parents' voices clashed in the hallway, full of blame and desperation. Lyric was locked in her room, her sobs muffled through the door. I stepped inside, not as the forgotten son or the shadow, but as someone with leverage, someone they could no longer dismiss. The room fell silent when they saw me. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's eyes pleaded. "James," she said, "please help us. Help your sister. Help the family." Lyric emerged after a moment. her face pale, her hands trembling. Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have listened. He never respected me, never loved me the way I convinced myself he did." I set my laptop on the coffee table and opened the files. The video played in front of them all. Drake's confession. Genevieve's cruelty, the unraveling of the entire charade. Silence filled the room. My parents stared, their faces drained, forced to confront that I had been right all along. For once, there was no rebuttal, no attempt to twist the narrative. Then Lyric's voice broke again, quieter this time. "There's more. I signed papers for him. I didn't read them. I thought they were routine, just part of the business. If they investigate, my name is there too." The weight of her words pressed down like a stone. This wasn't just about saving reputation anymore. Her freedom was at stake. The phone rang. The same reporter as before. Her tone was sharp, insistent. "Do you confirm you have the evidence? If you do, we can publish. It will take Drake down for good." My hand hovered over the receiver. I knew what it meant. If I agreed, Drake would fall, but Lyric's involvement could become front-page news. My family's eyes locked on me. For the first time, they weren't judging me, they were waiting. Every decision I'd ever made had been dismissed, but now my choice would shape all of theirs. Inside me, the war raged. To stay silent would mean protecting Lyric, but it would also mean burying myself again in the role of fixer, the shield they always demanded. To speak would mean ending the lies, but destroying the illusion they clung to. I turned to Lyric. Her eyes were swollen, searching mine. "I can't hide this," I told her. "I won't. But if you're ready to stand on the side of truth, I'll stand with you, not to shield you. To free us both." The words hung heavy in the room, but I felt the shift, an invisible line drawn between the past and the present. For the first time, I was not carrying their burden. I was choosing my own ground. I lifted the phone. My voice was steady. "Yes, I have evidence. But this story isn't just about him. It's about what we've allowed, what we've ignored for too long. If you want it, you'll have the whole truth." The reporter's pause was brief but weighted. "Then let's bring it all to light." As I set the phone down, I knew there was no going back. The door had opened, and through it was not salvation for my family, but exposure for all of us. And yet for the first time I felt no fear. Only the clarity of someone who had finally stopped running. A week had passed since the wedding that never happened, but the ripples still spread across the city like cracks in glass. I sat in a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and the faint hum of espresso machines waiting for the reporter. My family had begged me not to come to let the scandal die, but I knew better. This wasn't just about Drake or Genevieve. It was about all the years I had been silenced. When she arrived, she wasted no time. I slid the folder across the table, the video from the rehearsal dinner, the leaked financial documents, the anonymous emails. She sifted through them with a steady hand, then looked up and nodded. "This fills the final gap," she said. "We had multiple sources, but nothing that tied it all together. You are that missing link." The weight of her words settled over me. For once I wasn't disposable. I was essential. My phone buzzed on the table. Dozens of missed calls from my parents. My mother's voice trembled in a voicemail. "James, don't do this. Think of your sister, think of us." But I had already thought of them. My entire life had been nothing but thinking of them. This time I chose to think of myself. The next morning, the story broke. Front page. Drake Thornhill exposed as the orchestrator of a multi-million-dollar fraud, his company collapsing in real time. The internet roared, hashtags trended, and every news channel replayed clips of him at the rehearsal dinner. The Thornhills were finished. And with them, my family's name was dragged into the storm. Not long after, the police came knocking. Lyric's signature had appeared on documents authorizing transfers, papers she had signed blindly, trusting Drake. She was summoned for questioning. Her hands shook when she called me, her voice small. "Will you come with me?" I agreed, but I made the terms clear. "I'll go with you not to cover your mistakes, but to prove you were manipulated. This ends differently." At the station, the interrogation room was cold, sterile. Drake tried to turn the tables, claiming Lyric knew exactly what she signed. His smirk was venomous. Lyric's face went pale, her body crumpling under the weight of his lies. I leaned forward, steady my voice cutting through the silence. I warned her. He pressured her. And I have the emails to prove it. The officers took my statement. The evidence was undeniable. For once, my word carried weight. It was my testimony, not my silence, that kept Lyric from being dragged down with him. Later that evening, Genevieve found me outside the courthouse. Her perfume hit before her words. "You could end this," she whispered, slipping an envelope across the bench. Money, connections, a chance to rewrite the story. I looked at her, the woman who had stolen my sister's dignity in public, who had sneered as my family clung to appearances. "You already took the wedding from me," I said evenly. "You won't take the truth." I left the envelope unopened on the bench. Walking out of the building, the late sun blinded me for a moment. I lifted my face to it, let the light fill me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character, the repairman patching the fractures no one else wanted to face. I was the witness, the one who